Relax and let go. Don't force it. It's already yours. The moment you stop struggling, the moment you release the tight grip of fear and desperation, life begins to move in your favor. So many live in the torment of forcing, pushing, and striving, as if the blessings of God are far away and must be chased, but the truth is, what you seek has already been given. The answer was spoken over you before you even asked. The path was cleared before you took the first step. To force is to doubt, but to rest is to trust. Relax, because the evidence of your desire does not need to be seen before you believe. Let go, because harvest cannot come by pulling at the roots, but by allowing the seed to grow in silence. Stand in quiet confidence, knowing that it is already yours, and watch how the unseen becomes seen without your struggle. Relax and let go. Don't force it. It's already yours. There is a hidden strength that is only discovered in the place of inner surrender, a strength so subtle yet so powerful that it changes the entire course of a life without outward struggle, and it is here that the true secret of manifestation and fulfillment is found, for what you continue to chase with restless energy eludes you. But what you release with calm confidence flows to you effortlessly. This is the paradox of spiritual law, that surrender is not weakness but the greatest proof of faith. Because when you let go of forcing, you declare to yourself and to the universe that you already possess what you desire, and possession within is the only possession that matters, for the outer world has no choice but to reflect the inner state. To live in force is to live in resistance, as if you are trying to bend life with your bare hands, but to relax into trust is to stand in harmony with the higher order that governs all things, and this order is unfailing, perfect, and complete, bringing to each person the harvest of their innermost conviction. Think of the river. It never strains to reach the ocean. It simply flows, certain that its end is already prepared. So too must you learn to flow in confidence that the destination is secured, that the promise is already yours. The world teaches you to hustle, to grasp, to labor endlessly, as if the only way to obtain is to fight for every piece of bread. But the spiritual law whispers something entirely different. It says, be still, and no, it says, cease from striving, for the work is finished. It says, rest, because it has already been given. When you surrender, you are not abandoning your desire, you are embracing it more deeply than ever before, for you no longer seek it with anxious eyes. Instead, you live from the reality of its possession, which is the highest form of belief. To force is to confess lack, to struggle is to admit doubt, but to surrender is to stand in abundance and to declare, I need not chase, for I already have. It is the child who knows his father's love that rests secure, while the orphan lives in fear of provision. You are not abandoned, you are provided for, and to force is to forget your inheritance, while to surrender is to live as the heir you were always meant to be. Look at the seed planted in the soil. No gardener stands over it, pulling at the earth, demanding that it grow, for the gardener knows the silent process of life is at work. The seed must dissolve in darkness before it can rise into light, and so too must your desire, once released into imagination, be allowed to grow in silence, without your anxious interference, without your desperate questioning, without your restless tugging at its roots. The very act of letting go is the faith that proves you believe in the unseen process, and faith is the assurance that what you hope for already exists, even when your senses cannot yet confirm it. Surrender is not laziness, it is not passivity, it is not giving up. It is alignment with the truth that everything comes forth from within, and once the inner work is done, the outer result is inevitable. When you are still within, the storm outside loses its power. When you rest in confidence, the outer world begins to bend toward your quiet expectation. For all force begins first in mind, and to cease from forcing is to calm the currents of thought that disturb the waters of life. You will find that the moment you truly let go, the very thing you longed for begins to approach you, not because you ran after it, but because you became the magnet that drew it to yourself. The vibration of surrender is irresistible, for it signals to the universe that you are already complete. And completeness always attracts more completeness. Do not mistake surrender for inaction. It is the most potent action you can ever take, for it shifts the foundation of your being from one of lack to one of fulfillment, and when you live fulfilled within, fulfillment appears without. Have you not noticed that the things you least struggle for often arrive most easily? The conversations you did not rehearse, the blessings you did not chase, the gifts you did not beg, for they came because your hands were open to receive, not clenched in fear. To relax is to open the hands of the soul, to release the tension of control, to allow life to pour in what is already written as yours. Struggle shuts the door, but surrender opens it wide. The one who trusts does not force, and the one who forces does not trust. You must decide which master you serve, fear or faith, lack or abundance, anxiety or peace. When you choose surrender, you declare that you are no longer a beggar but a son, no longer a chaser but an inheritor, no longer one striving for crumbs, but one seated at the table of plenty. The inner surrender is the posture of royalty, because only the one who knows his wealth can afford to rest, while the poor soul of doubt labors endlessly to prove what he does not yet believe. The power of surrender is the power of knowing who you are and what you already possess, and when you stand in this knowing, nothing and no one can keep your blessing from you, for it is already secured within. So today, release your grip, let go of the tension, cease from your restless striving, close your eyes and live from the end, not towards it, but from it, as though it is already finished, because it is. When you accept that truth, your body rests, your mind quiets, your soul rejoices, and your life rearranges itself to mirror the inner stillness of faith. Relax and let go, for you cannot miss what is already yours. The greatest secret of creation and fulfillment lies in what may be called the invisible law of assumption, the truth that life on the outside is nothing more than the reflection of what is consistently assumed on the inside. Everything that appears in your world is a mirror image of the state you inwardly occupy, and nothing can come to you unless you first give it room to live within your imagination. This is why so many people chase endlessly after outcomes but never arrive, for they try to change the world while clinging inwardly to the same old assumptions that contradict their desire. But the wise understand that to change the outer, they must first assume a new inner reality, and then trust that the outer will conform. Assumption is not wishing, it is not hoping, it is not daydreaming without conviction, it is the deliberate inner acceptance of a new state as though it were already true, and when you persist in that inner acceptance, reality has no choice but to reshape itself around you. Life is not happening to you, it is happening from you. Your assumptions, whether conscious or unconscious, form the blueprint from which your experiences are built. So if you assume lack, you will see lack. If you assume delay, you will experience delay. But if you assume fulfillment, joy, and completion, these will manifest in ways you cannot even predict. The law is invisible because it works silently, behind the scenes, beyond the senses. Yet it governs everything, and those who awaken to it realize they no longer need to force the outer world into shape, for they can mold it in silence within, and let life reflect their silent decree. Consider this: when you imagine a conversation with someone and assume they love you, you carry yourself differently in their presence, you respond differently to their words, and they in turn respond to your changed vibration, thus proving the assumption creates its own evidence. But if you assume rejection, your actions, words, and energy shift to match that inner belief, and the other cannot help but mirror it back to you, not because they have changed, but because your assumption commanded the scene. The law of assumption explains why two people can live in the same world yet experience entirely different realities, for each sees not the world as it is, but as they assume it to be, and each continually confirms their own assumption through the evidence they unconsciously attract. The moment you dare to assume the end, even before any evidence appears, you have planted the seed of a new world, and if you do not uproot it with doubt, it must grow into visible form, for imagination is the womb of creation, and assumption is the seed that determines what shall be born. To force is to reveal unbelief in this law, for you struggle outwardly because you do not yet trust that your inner state commands the outer scene, but once you understand the law of assumption, you stop striving, for you know that the only true work is to dwell inwardly in the state of your desire already fulfilled, and then let the invisible law bring about its perfect reflection. This is why the practice of living from the end is so powerful, because when you feel yourself already in possession of what you seek, you bypass time and circumstances and anchor yourself in the invisible reality that must harden into fact. If you seek love, assume you are already deeply loved, and soon love will surround you. If you seek provision, assume you are already abundantly supplied, and supply will find its way into your life. If you seek healing, assume you are already whole, and wholeness will rise within you until the outer shell conforms. Everything begins in assumption. No outer action can compensate for an inner denial, and no outer obstacle can withstand a firm inner conviction. Your task, then, is simple but profound. Assume the highest, assume the best, assume the end, and do so with such natural ease that it becomes your dwelling place rather than a fleeting thought. Let no outer contradiction disturb your inner knowing, for appearances are but shadows that eventually fade, but assumptions held in faith become the new reality. The invisible law does not work by force, it works by certainty. The one who assumes does not need to push or grasp. They live in quiet confidence that what is accepted within must manifest without. This is why surrender and assumption walk hand in hand. You cannot surrender if you have not assumed the end, and you cannot truly assume if you are still grasping and forcing. But once you unite them, you become unstoppable, for you know it is already finished. Imagine a playwright who has already written the last scene of the play. Though the actors must go through each act, the ending is secure, and no matter how the story twists and turns, it must conclude as written. So too, when you assume the end within, your life may still pass through chapters that appear contrary, but the conclusion is already determined, and reality must bend itself to fulfill the script you have inwardly authored. The invisible law of assumption does not fail, it does not make exceptions, it does not play favorites. It simply reflects with precision the state you most deeply occupy. If you continue to rehearse fear, lack, and failure in your inner dialogue, then even if opportunities come, you will find ways to sabotage them, for your assumption demands consistency. But if you rehearse victory, peace, and abundance, even obstacles will turn into stepping stones, for your assumption will transform them into means to your desired end. To relax and let go, therefore, is not to abandon your desire, but to dwell in it inwardly with such assurance that you no longer feel the need to chase or to force. You walk through life as if your dream is already fact, and this invisible certainty reshapes everything around you. That is the power of the invisible law of assumption. It teaches you that your imagination is not idle, but creative, that your inner talk is not meaningless, but causal, that your unseen convictions are the architects of your visible world. So tonight, or even now as you hear these words, dare to drop every assumption of lack and limitation. Dare to clothe yourself in the assumption of being the one you long to be. Dare to rest in the invisible law that makes no mistakes, and then live as though it is already so. For when you assume and persist, life cannot resist. It must yield the fruit of the seed you planted in the soil of your imagination. Relax and let go, for you do not need to force what the invisible law has already secured. It is already yours. There is a sacred ease in the art of effortless receiving, a way of living that transcends the restless chase and anxious striving of the world, for true faith is not loud, not frantic, not desperate, but quiet, calm, and assured, and the one who believes does not stretch out trembling hands to grasp, but opens the heart in restful expectation, knowing that what is theirs will come without strain, for receiving is not something you fight for, it is something you allow, and this allowance begins the moment you release the false belief that you must earn, beg, or struggle for what is already given. To live in effort is to confess that you do not yet believe, but to live in effortless receiving is to reveal that you are so certain of your possession that you no longer need proof. For proof belongs to the senses, but faith belongs to the unseen, and it is the unseen that gives birth to the seen. Imagine the breath. You do not force it, you allow it. The inhalation comes naturally, the exhalation flows freely, and life sustains itself in this effortless rhythm. So too is the rhythm of manifestation. It is not forced but natural, not strained but fluid, not coerced but inevitable. The tree does not strive to bear fruit, the flower does not struggle to unfold, the sun does not strain to shine. All creation receives effortlessly because creation rests in the law of being, and you, too, are designed to live in that ease. The reason so many fail to experience their desires is not because they lack power, but because they block the flow of receiving with their restless doubts, their anxious waiting, their continual interference. They plant the seed in imagination but dig it up with fear, never allowing the process to ripen in silence, never trusting that what is sown within must appear without. To receive effortlessly, you must first accept that you already have, for no one strains to receive what is already theirs. The rightful heir does not beg for his inheritance, he only waits for the timing of its release, and he waits with dignity, not desperation. The beggar asks again and again because he believes he does not yet have. But the one who knows it is theirs waits in silence, certain that what is promised cannot be withheld. When you grasp and clutch at life, you send out the vibration of lack, and lack multiplies. But when you relax into certainty, you send out the vibration of abundance, and abundance rushes to meet you, because life mirrors your state and not your words. This is why effortless receiving is not idleness but mastery, for it requires the discipline of trust, the courage to let go, the maturity to rest in the unseen when everything outside screams contradiction. When you stand in effortless receiving, you become like a magnet that draws without struggle, for the magnet does not chase the iron filings, it simply is, and by its being it attracts. Likewise, when you assume possession inwardly and live in calm assurance, you cannot help but draw the outer evidence to yourself, for your state is magnetic, your assumption irresistible, and your certainty creative. Do you not see that the things which have come most easily to you were never those you chased desperately? The friendships that blossomed without effort, the opportunities that seemed to appear out of nowhere, the blessings that landed in your lap when you had stopped striving, these were the fruits of effortless receiving. Proof that life bends to your inner ease, not your outer force. To practice effortless receiving is to learn the art of detachment, not detachment from desire, but detachment from the struggle of how and when, for the how and the when are not yours to dictate. Your only part is to assume the end and dwell in its reality, while life orchestrates the details beyond your sight. Consider the farmer. He does not dig up the soil daily to check on the seed. He does not force the rain or the sun. He simply trusts that the silent process is at work, and so he rests until the harvest is ready. This is effortless receiving, the faith that what has been planted in imagination must ripen in reality, if only you allow it. Yet how often do people sabotage their own harvest by restless worry, by constant complaint, by fearful interference? They do not trust the invisible process, so they strain and strive, and in their striving they uproot the seed before it can bear fruit. But the wise know that the only true work is to rest in fulfillment, to live inwardly from the end, to walk through the day as though the promise is already fact, and to do so with such natural ease that they no longer look for evidence, for the very absence of searching proves they already believe. The paradox is that the moment you stop looking for it, it comes, because your searching is proof of doubt, but your rest is proof of faith, and faith always receives. So what does it mean to live in effortless receiving? It means you no longer see yourself as a beggar at the door of life, but as a child seated at the table of abundance, no longer pleading for scraps, but calmly partaking of what is already yours. It means you no longer wake each morning wondering if your desire will come, but knowing it has already come in the unseen, and that the outer world is only catching up. It means you no longer feel the need to prove, to chase, to grasp, but you walk in quiet dignity, knowing that your inner reality is secure, and therefore the outer must bow to it. Effortless receiving is not a technique but a state of being, a resting in the truth that all things are finished, all things are yours, and all things flow in perfect order when you align within. And once you taste this state, you will never again return to anxious striving, for you will have discovered the joy of resting in what is already complete. You will see that every struggle was unnecessary, every fear unfounded, every doubt a thief of your peace. You will see that the universe has always been on your side, that God has never withheld from you, that the only barrier was your restless grip. And when you finally let go, when you finally allow, when you finally rest, then the floodgates of blessing open wide, and you realize it was always waiting for your surrender. That is the mystery and the beauty of effortless receiving, that you do not need to force, because it is already yours. All that you behold in your world is nothing more than the outpicturing of the inner image you hold, for the inner picture always precedes the outer world, and nothing can appear in your experience unless it first exists in the unseen realm of imagination. This is the law of life, immutable and certain, that what you consistently see within will eventually harden into fact without. And this is why those who live blindly, carried by fears and doubts, find those same fears and doubts becoming flesh, while those who dare to see the end within find the world bending itself to deliver that end in perfect detail. The outer world is not causal but reflective. It is not the source but the mirror, and to chase the mirror while ignoring the face is to live in endless frustration, for you cannot change the reflection without first changing the source of the image. To grasp at the world is to grasp at shadows, but to mold the inner picture is to mold the substance from which all shadows spring. Think of the artist. Before a single stroke touches the canvas, the picture already exists in his mind, and the brush only reveals what imagination has already completed. So too is your life, that every action, every event, every so-called coincidence is but the brush revealing the inner masterpiece you have accepted within. If your inner picture is one of defeat, the outer world will echo with loss. If your inner picture is one of abundance, life will mirror prosperity. If your inner picture is one of love, then love will surround you in ways both ordinary and miraculous, for the world cannot resist the image you hold most firmly within. Yet many live as prisoners of unconscious pictures, rehearsing lack, dwelling on rejection, magnifying fear, and then wondering why life seems cruel, never realizing they are looking at their own handiwork made visible. To live consciously is to seize the power of the inner picture, to choose deliberately the vision you entertain, and to persist in that vision until the outer must comply, for the law does not fail. This is why relaxation and letting go are essential, for you cannot form a clear picture when your mind is clouded with worry, nor can you hold the end with conviction while grasping desperately at appearances. You must withdraw from the outer world, close your eyes to its contradictions, and dwell quietly in the picture of your fulfilled desire until it becomes more real to you than what your senses presently show. The child who daydreams of adventure feels the excitement of it long before it arrives, and often that very excitement draws the means to make it real. So too must you live in the picture of your fulfillment, not as a fleeting wish, but as a dwelling place of the heart. The inner picture is the seed, the outer manifestation is the harvest, and no harvest can appear that was not first planted within. Therefore, if you dislike your harvest, do not curse the field, but change the seed, for the field only reflects what was sown. To force the outer world is like trying to paint over a reflection in a mirror. No matter how hard you scrub, the image remains until you alter the original face, but to rest in the inner picture is to alter the source, and then without effort the reflection shifts. This is the secret of creation, to live in the unseen as though it were seen, to assume within what you long to see without, to picture clearly the end and then release it with confidence, knowing it must take form in due season. The greatest error of mankind is to believe that the outer world holds the power, that circumstances dictate destiny, that chance rules life, when in truth it is always the inner picture silently arranging the details, drawing the people, setting the stage, until what was once invisible stands in plain sight. This is why the wise do not fret over appearances, for they know appearances are the past made visible, the echo of old assumptions, the harvest of yesterday's seeds. Instead, they fix their gaze inward, painting the picture of tomorrow with deliberate care, choosing joy, love, abundance, and peace as their inner dwelling, confident that the outer must soon reflect it. Do not be deceived by delay, for the seed takes time to push through the soil, and often in the darkness it seems as if nothing is happening, but beneath the surface the roots are spreading, the life is stirring, the picture is unfolding, and when the time is ripe, it bursts forth into visibility. Your task is not to force the sprout, but to hold the vision, not to wrestle with appearances, but to rest in the inner picture, not to labor outwardly in desperation, but to create inwardly in confidence. The one who understands this law ceases to live as a victim of chance and begins to live as the author of destiny, for they know the pen is imagination, the ink is assumption, and the page is life itself. To worry is to draw a picture of lack, and lack will appear. To fear is to picture defeat, and defeat will manifest. But to imagine the best, to dwell in the joy of fulfillment, to rest in the picture of your desire, already complete, this is to call into being the world you long for. The inner picture is not idle fantasy, but the blueprint of reality, and when you persist in it, it must solidify into fact. Even now, every detail of your life is the crystallization of pictures once accepted within, whether consciously or unconsciously, and this truth, once realized, liberates you, for if you have drawn the unwanted, you can just as surely draw the desired. Change the picture, and the world must follow, for the law is unbreakable. So today, release your grasp on appearances, stop trying to edit the mirror, and instead retreat inward to the secret place where all creation begins. See yourself already as the one you desire to be. Hear the words spoken to you in that fulfilled state. Feel the joy of its reality, and let that picture become your dwelling. Do not visit it occasionally, but abide in it continually, until it feels natural, until it feels inevitable, until it feels more real than the outer contradictions. Then relax, let go, and trust, for the picture once accepted is the decree of destiny, and no power on earth can prevent its manifestation. The inner picture precedes the outer world, and once you know this, you will no longer live in fear of the seen, but in mastery of the unseen. Relax, hold the picture, and let it unfold, for it is already yours. Faith in its truest essence is not toil, not strain, not the exhausting labor of trying to make things happen, but the serene confidence of rest, the quiet assurance that what you seek is already complete, already given, already finished in the unseen, and that life is only unfolding what has been decreed from within. Yet how many misunderstand this, imagining that faith is a constant effort, a continual pleading, a restless battle to convince God or the universe to grant them what they desire, when in reality faith is the absolute opposite, for faith is the end of struggle, the cessation of striving, the peaceful acknowledgement that all is well and all is yours. To struggle is to confess doubt, to labor anxiously is to reveal unbelief, but to rest is to prove trust, for only the one who truly believes can lay down the burden of fear and dwell in ease. The mother does not worry whether her child will be born once the seed of life is planted. She rests in the assurance of the process, and her rest is the evidence of her faith. So, too, when you hold fast to the end within, when you assume its reality, your rest becomes the sign that you believe, for no one continues to beg for what they know they already have. Faith is not the endless repetition of requests, but the serene dwelling in possession, the inner state of having received, the calm conviction that what is seen with the eyes of imagination must in due time be seen with the eyes of flesh. When you live in this rest, you stop chasing signs, you stop demanding proof. You stop grasping at appearances, for you know that appearances are the slowest part of creation, while the invisible realm already holds your desire complete. Struggle comes from thinking the outer is the cause, but rest comes from knowing the inner is the source, and once the source is secured, the outcome is inevitable. Faith does not say, "One day it will be mine." Faith says, "It is already mine, though unseen." Faith does not tremble at delay. Faith rests in timing. Faith does not collapse at contradiction. Faith rests in certainty. The proof of your faith is not your words but your posture, not your declarations but your state of being, and if you are still anxious, still striving, still restless, then you have not yet entered into the Sabbath of belief, for the Sabbath is the rest of knowing the work is finished. Think of the farmer who plants his crop once the seed is sown. He does not dig it up daily to check. He does not spend sleepless nights wringing his hands. He rests, confident that the silent laws of nature are at work, and his rest is his faith. In the same way, when you have planted your desire in imagination, when you have assumed it as true, your only task is to rest, to live in the joy of it fulfilled, to let your soul breathe in the peace of possession, and to walk through life as though nothing is missing, for in truth nothing is. The reason so many grow weary on their spiritual journey is because they mistake struggle for faith, thinking their endless effort will prove their devotion. But the higher truth is that the very effort betrays their doubt, while the one who rests quietly in assurance reveals the highest form of trust. You need not force God to give what he has already given. You need not wrestle the universe into submission, for all creation is already finished, and you only partake of what you inwardly claim as yours. Rest, therefore, is not weakness but mastery, not idleness but alignment, not passivity but power, for it is the soul's declaration that the unseen is more real than the seen. To rest in faith is to rise above the noise of appearances, to smile at delay, to rejoice in contradiction, for you know that none of these have power to alter the inner decree. You walk with a lightness that others cannot understand, for while they strain and sweat, you glide in calm confidence, and soon they marvel as blessings appear effortlessly in your life, never knowing it was your rest, not your struggle, that drew them forth. Rest is not the absence of desire, but the fulfillment of it within, and once it is fulfilled inwardly, the outer must align. This is why the moment you truly rest, things begin to shift, for your rest proves your assumption, and your assumption creates reality. To struggle is to swim against the current, exhausting yourself in vain, but to rest is to float upon the current, carried effortlessly to your destination, for the river knows the way, and your task is only to trust it. Do not mistake the quietness of faith for inactivity, for in that quietness lies the greatest activity of all, the unseen power of alignment, drawing all things to you in perfect order. The restless one chases opportunities, but the one at rest attracts them. The anxious one clings to people, but the one at rest magnetizes love. The fearful one forces outcomes, but the one at rest receives miracles. Rest is the fragrance of faith, the natural perfume of trust, and the one who carries it cannot help but live in abundance, for all life rushes to answer the call of a soul at peace. The greatest victories are not won by struggle but by surrender, the greatest blessings are not forced but received, and the greatest proof of faith is not noise but silence, not frenzy but calm, not striving but rest. So if you would know the measure of your faith, ask yourself not how loudly you declare, but how deeply you rest. Have you let go of the need to see evidence? Have you released the anxious grip of control? Have you surrendered the restless chase? If so, you are walking in true faith, and your rest is the guarantee of your manifestation. For in the stillness of faith, the unseen becomes seen, the invisible becomes visible, and what you once longed for arrives with such ease that you wonder why you ever struggled at all. The law is simple. Believe you have received, and you shall receive, but the proof that you believe is that you rest. Therefore stop striving, stop forcing, stop exhausting yourself in desperate effort, and enter into the rest of faith, for there, and only there, will you find the power that brings all things to pass. Relax, let go, and trust, for faith is rest, not struggle, and what you rest in will soon stand before you as undeniable fact, because it was always already yours.